Section 30 of Monday Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Monday Tales by Alphonse Daudet. Translated by Marion McIntyre. Section 30. The Third Reading. As true as my name is Bellicer, and I have my plane in my hand at this moment, if Papa Thiers imagines that the fine lesson he has taught us will be of the slightest use to us, it is because he doesn't know the people of Paris. You see, monsieur, they may shoot us wholesale, transport us, export us, add Cayenne to Satory, and pack the prison ships as close as sardines in a barrel. But the true Parisian loves a riot, and nothing can destroy that taste of his. We have it in our blood. What would you? It isn't politics so much that amuses us, but the noise it makes, the closed workshops, the gatherings, the lounging here and there. Yes, and there's another thing I scarcely know how to explain to you. To understand it, one should have been born where I was born, Rue de Lyon, in a carpenter's workshop, should have served an apprenticeship from the time he was 8 until he was 15 years old, trundling a hand-barrow filled with chips along the faubourg. Ah, well, I can truly say I had my fill of revolutions in those days. Little though I was then, standing no higher than these boots of mine, there was nothing lively astir in Paris but I was sure to be found on the spot. And generally I knew in advance what was afoot. When I saw workmen walking arm in arm through the faubourg, taking up the entire sidewalk, while women stood at their doorways, chattering, gesticulating, and a great mob of people issued from the barrière, I said to myself as I wheeled on my chips, "We are in for it now. Good enough, something's up." And in fact there always was. Going home of an evening, I would enter the shop and find it full of people. Friends of my father's were discussing politics around his bench. Some neighbors had brought him in the newspaper, for in those days you could not buy one for a sou, as at present. Those in the same house who wished to take it clubbed together, a number of them, and passed it round from story to story. Papa Bellicer, who was never idle no matter what happened, kept his plane angrily at work as he listened to the latest news. And I remember, too, that on such days as those, the moment we seated ourselves at the table, the mother never failed to say to us, "Keep quiet, children. Your father is out of sorts on account of political affairs." You may well believe I did not understand very much of their cursed politics. All the same, there were a few words that would force themselves into my head through hearing them so often, as for instance, "That rascally Guizot who has gone to Gand." I didn't understand very clearly who that Guizot was, nor what going to Gand might mean. But what odds! I repeated again and again with the others, "Canaille de Guizot! Canaille de Guizot!" And I was all the more pleased to refer to that poor Monsieur Guizot as canaille, on account of the fact that in my mind I had confounded him with a big scoundrel of a policeman who was on duty at the Rue de Lyon, and made my life miserable for me on account of my barrow of chips. There was no love lost between the quarter and that big red-faced fellow. Children, dogs, everyone was at his heels. There was, however, a wine-seller who used to try to gain him over by slipping a glass of wine to him through a small opening in his shop. The big red face would come nearer and nearer, with an innocent air, and glance from right to left to see that none of his superiors were about. Then, as he passed, whew! I've never seen anyone else toss down a glass of wine as quickly as he did. Sly fellow! One had only to lie in wait for the moment when his elbow was raised to his mouth, steal behind him, and cry out, "Look out! Sergot, the officer's coming!" The people of Paris are all just like that. The policeman bears the brunt of everything. For everyone is accustomed to hate these poor devils, to regard them as curs. If the ministry commit follies, the police pay the penalty. And once a glorious revolution is in progress, the ministry depart for Versailles, the policemen are thrown into the canal. But to return to what I was telling you. Whenever there was anything of importance going on in Paris, I was one of the first to know it. On those days, all the small fry of the quarter would hold their meetings too, and together we would go down the faubourg. We could hear people exclaiming, "It is at Rue Montmartre! No, at Porte Saint-Denis!" Others, whose business took them in that direction, would return furious because they had been unable to pass. Women were seen running towards the bakers' shops. Carriage entrances were closed. All this excitement went to our heads. We sang as we passed by. We jostled the little street vendors who were quickly gathering up their goods and their baskets, as if it were some terribly stormy day. Sometimes when we reached the canal, the bridges of the locks were already turned. Fiacres and trucks were compelled to wait there. Cabmen were cursing, and everyone was uneasy. On the run we would scale the steps of the footbridge which at that time separated the faubourg from the Rue du Temple, and then we reached the boulevards. Oh, what fun upon the boulevard on the day of Mardi Gras, or on the day of a riot! Scarcely a carriage to be seen. One could rush along at his ease upon the driveway. When they saw us pass, the shopkeepers of every quarter knew well what it meant, and closed their shops quickly. We heard the clatter of shutters. But once their stores were closed, these people would occupy the sidewalk in front of their doors. For with the Parisian, no feeling is stronger than that of curiosity. At last, we would perceive a black mass, the mob itself obstructing all travel. There it was. But to see it properly, one must stand in the first row, and I can tell you, one was well thumped before he got there. However, by dint of shoving, jostling, sliding between the legs of others, we at last got where we wanted to be. Once we had taken our places in front of everybody, we breathed more freely and were proud enough. And indeed, the spectacle was worth all the trouble of getting there. No, believe me, neither Monsieur Bocage nor Monsieur Mélan ever gave me such a flutter of the heart as that I felt when, looking ahead in an open space at the end of the street, I saw the chief of police advancing, decorated with his sash. I heard the others exclaim, "The commissaire! The commissaire!" But I said nothing. My teeth were tightly closed through pleasure and terror combined. What I felt was indescribable. I thought to myself, "The commissaire has come! Now look out for blows from his club." It was not so much the blows from his club that impressed me, as that big devil of a man himself, with his sash upon his black swallow-tail coat, and that huge hat de monsieur he wore, which gave him the appearance of being out visiting, as it rose in the midst of all those shakoes and cocked hats. That made a tremendous impression upon me. After a flourish from the drum, the chief of police began to mumble something. He was so far from us that in spite of the intense silence his voice was lost in air, and all we could hear was "mn, mn, mn." But we were as thoroughly posted as himself about the riot laws. We knew that we were entitled to 3 readings of the Riot Act before his stick could whack us. At the first reading no one budged an inch. We stood there undisturbed, our hands in our pockets. It is true that when the drum beat the second time, some began to grow green, and to look right and left to see which way he would pass. When the third time came, prut, it was like the flight of a flock of partridges. There were howls, cat cries, aprons, caps, and hats began to disappear, while behind them clubs proceeded to belabor on every side. Ah, no! There is no play on the stage that could ever give you such emotions as those. It was food for 7 days' talk, when we related all this to the others who had not seen it, and how proud they were who could say, "I heard the third reading." It must be said, however, that for the sake of the fun, one often risked losing some of his hide. Just imagine! One day, it was at Point Saint-Eustache. I don't know how the commissaire had reckoned, but no sooner was the second reading disposed of Then the constables set to work, clubs in the air. I did not remain in waiting for them very long, you may believe. But all in vain I stretched my small legs to the utmost. One of those big devils fell upon me, and went for me at such very short notice that, after I had felt his stick whiz about me 2 or 3 times, he ended by giving it to me straight upon the head. Lord, what a whack! I had never seen so many stars in my life before. They brought me home with a broken head. But if you think that made me mend my ways, ah, well, hardly. All the time poor Mamma Belisaire was making compresses for me, I never once ceased exclaiming, "It isn't my fault. It is that rascally commissaire who played a trick upon all of us. He read the riot act only twice." End of section 30. Recording by Linda Johnson.